Hello again. I will say at once that I'm not a huge fan of people blacking up or sticking on false noses to play Jews. It is difficult these days to watch Alec Guinness playing Fagin in David Lean's version of Oliver Twist without raising one's eyebrows at the ridiculous nose he uses for the part. I'm not offended by such things, they just seem a little odd. Some people, though, are obsessed with such matters and spend their lives hunting out instances of blackface or anti-Semitism in Dickens and Shakespeare. One way to prove that you are a right-honoured liberal producer these days is, of course, to cast black people in white roles when doing a play by Shakespeare or a television version of Dickens. We saw that with the recent BBC production of Great Expectations, and it's done too with Shakespeare's plays. Mind, this is old hat these days, and if you really want to display your political correctness, then you must try something a little different. So it was that Shakespeare's Globe in London decided to cast a dwarf in the role of Hermia in A Midsummer Night's Dream. This was a very smart move because much humour is produced in the play by the fact that Hermia is not very tall. Lines such as, "Though she be but little, she is fierce," for example. Then too, Hermia is mocked for being short because somebody says to her, "Get you gone, you dwarf." Somebody at the Globe had the inspired idea of casting an actual dwarf in the role, thus ensuring that audiences would gasp with horror at hearing her being teased for her height. Genius. It also allowed them to put trigger warnings about ableism in advertisements and so on programmes. How cool is that? The woman cast in the role, Francesca Mills, may be seen in the thumbnail to this video. She seems mightily touchy and prone to grotesque exaggeration, but then perhaps that's why she was given the part. She says, "I wanted to bring attention to the violent language used against Hermia and her height, as it's often been overlooked and laughed at in the past." Been laughed at, has it? That might not be wholly unconnected with the fact that this is a comedy, of course. I'm no expert on Shakespeare, but I think that has a bearing on the case. There has always been a tradition in British humour of contrasting a fat person with a thin one, or a tall person with a short one. We remember Laurel and Hardy, for example. Were either of them being mocked for their size, or was it just that this image of a tubby man and a thin one, both with very different personalities, is pretty well universal in Britain and America? Is it offensive to thin people or those who are overweight? I've never heard this suggested. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, it's the same, with Helena being tall and Hermia short. And what's all this about violent language? Calling a short person a dwarf may well be offensive and unpleasant, but it's hardly violent. This harks back to what I've been saying about hate speech, the idea that mere words are tantamount to violence. Of course, there is such a thing as violent language, but calling a short person a dwarf is not an instance of it. If I threaten to cut somebody's throat, that's violent language. Or if I shout in the street that we must kill all members of this or that group, that is violent language. Teasing or mocking somebody because of their height doesn't fall into this category, though. If I didn't know any better, then I would think that the Globe Theatre had deliberately cast a dwarf in this role as a novelty turn, simply to create some controversy and fuss and enable them to add ableism to their programmes along with racism and misogyny. It looks very much like a wind-up, in short. In the description to this video, I give a link to a news item about this matter.